Good morning everyone and welcome to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today I want to talk kind of about a weird subject, and that subject is odd shaped quilts. Now let me tell you a little bit about what I mean. I'm talking about a quilt that you start. Sometimes it's without a pattern, it's just a design in your head and you start working on it. More often than not, they're EPP quilts, because with EPP quilts you can start with a single piece of your puzzle, your pattern, and you start putting it together. And once you get enough pieces together, you've got a shape. But unlike your traditionally pieced quilt blocks, which are usually square or rectangle, maybe sometimes they're a different shape, but usually they're those shapes. You've got no defining overall shape, or you have a defining overall shape and they're a bit hard to manage. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Example number one is our spring burst quilt. And this is a quilt made of diamonds in different colors, and the colors and the fabrics make up the pattern that's constructed of all these diamonds. But the problem is it's essentially round. It's kind of a octagon-y shape, but it's really round. Now what are you going to do with a round quilt? That has puzzled me for months, because I started working on this. I was very excited about it, get all the fabrics together to create this cute little design, and then realize, how am I going to stop? It's like an addiction that you get started and you've got no off-ramp. So I've got an idea about this one. I'm not quite ready to share it, but I think I've come up, after several months of thinking about this, how we're going to finish up the diamond pieces and move on to some kind of border that will allow us to define the final shape. And within that border, I am hoping to add a detail that will kind of contribute to the overall look of the quilt and the pattern of the diamonds, versus just being a plain piece of fabric. Now I'm going to move this off. We haven't seen this in a while, but it's still here. I'm still working on it. Pardon me just a second. Oh, by the way, don't you love this cup? There it is. It's got a cute little Singer looking sewing machine. It reminds me a lot of my red eye I have, that I've affectionately named Anna. It's a cute little cup. My husband got it for me off of Facebook or Amazon or something like that. It's really cute. Okay, back to our main subject. The other quilt we're working on that we have that same kind of problem is our ring cycles, and our ring cycles have this design on the edges of them. So I've got to figure out a way to bring that odd shape flow into some kind of straight line, because I don't want to try to bind this crazy shape and get that all straightened out. So we'll be working on that as well. And again, this is a quilt that had kind of an odd shape. And you don't really think about that when you start, but you do. Now, how do you... We talked a little bit about how this happens, and usually it happens when you're creating your own. Sometimes if you're creating from a pattern that someone else has developed, they've already worked through those things. And maybe they're giving you a pattern piece to use on the edges, or they're telling you to cut a strip such and such size and sew it on to the side. It just kind of depends on the pattern. Now let's talk about this one, because this is one that I did finish and I wanted to show you how I finished it. And it's the same way that I finish a lot of my EPP projects. This is let me hold this so you can see it really well. This is a project that used the honeycomb pieces, and the edge of the actual EPP is right along this jagged edge. Now that would have been an absolute nightmare to try to finish it and leave that little piece jutting out there. What would have happened if you left that by itself? It would have been really hard to bind it in a way that you could still see the shape, and it would be the same size as the other pieces. And also, as it got laundered, it would get dog-eared and it would fall down. It would never hold that shape out there like you wanted unless you did something special to the quilt to stiffen it up. So what I did was, once I got all this done, I put a strip of fabric along the edge to create a straight line, and then I hand appliqued the edge of that EPP piece onto the border. And I've done that with several quilts, and it really does seem to work out the best. It's usually a long, kind of skinny piece of fabric that you use along the edge, and you can increase the size of your quilt significantly if you use a wider border. Now let's take this one, because this is the same thing. And I had a couple others, but I didn't want to get kind of crazy about it. This is one that had the flowers created by the EPP, and then there was one row of white hexes all around the flowers. So in this case, the piece of fabric that sat right on the edge, let me get a ruler. In some places, that piece of fabric, the amount showing, the amount, well, let's do this, the amount through to the edge of the binding was probably about 1.5 to 3 inches. So it was no wider than 3 inches. But that allowed us to change that from an irregular edge to a nice straight edge. And that makes the binding easier, it makes handling the quilt easier, and it really works in your favor. Now, like I said earlier, sometimes you're going to be left to figure out how to bring all of that together and finish it. And sometimes those instructions may be included in a pattern that you've purchased. Sometimes they're easy, and then sometimes, I'm going to bring this one out again, it's a real pain. This one has been my nemesis as far as that goes, because I'll sit back and think about, oh, that would be pretty to do. Oh, that would be really hard to do. Or I will say, what if we just do X? And then I can think of 3 or 4 reasons why that wouldn't be a good idea. I initially thought what I was going to do was just create some strips for each of the 8 sides, similar to what I just showed you on these other quilts. But the problem is, an 8-sided quilt serves very few purposes. It's not big enough to use as a cover unless you're a child. It's hard to hang an 8-sided quilt because you would actually have to tack along each and every side to have it sit to the wall smoothly. If it were a smaller quilt, you could mount it on a piece of acid-free mat board or foam core board and hang it that way, and that would hold its shape. But this is too big for that, and I don't really have any place that I would like to display this on a permanent basis. What I'm envisioning for this is a lap size quilt, or maybe even something a little bit smaller than a lap size quilt that just may be decorative on the back of the sofa or on my ottoman. When I originally thought about doing this, I thought it was going to be just big enough for the top of the ottoman and come down just a little bit. But we've gotten way bigger than that at this point. So we've got to readjust what I want it to do. So ultimately, this decision about how to finish that quilting project is up to you to figure out what you want it to look like, what the purpose is, and how to bring those two things together in a way that pleases you in an aesthetic way and also pleases you in a functional way. You don't want something that's hard to wash or hard to manage. You don't want something that's difficult to hang on the wall or put on a bed or on top of a table. So think through the purpose of what you're working on and how you plan to use things as a tool to get you to that finish line on a quilt. And like I said, this is particularly useful thought process to use with EPP projects because, like I said, usually they start out and before you know it, they're big and they've got these odd sizes and you need to figure out what you're doing with them. I hope this was helpful in your planning process for your EPP projects. And sometimes there's others that you have the same kind of issue with, and it helps you think through those things. Thank you so much for joining me today. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you love the content, and we'll see you next week. Shamrock Quilt Studio.